Monster Hunter. Hunter's Notes Introduction. www.zhaozuiyuan.com Fundamentalist Monster Hunter Fellow. Journey starting from the Kokot hero. Roaring Dragon, Bukai village at the foot of the snowy mountain. Moga's Son of the Sea is a feast for the grand fisherman. Jieyun is a place of warm soup, with Tianjin dance style. Barabear in the Great Desert is nowhere to be seen. On the Dragon Sense ship, a red ominous star swept across the ridge. Sun launching has raised a Tyrannosaurus Rex cub. Radiant Flames, the eternal god of fire buds and water clouds. Welcome to the group, Water Group Online, https://www.zhaozuiyan.com. A few sentences written before. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. I will try my best to write so that readers who have not played the Monster Hunt series can also understand. And in order to enhance the rationality of the plot, I will make some minor adjustments to the original game settings. For example, monsters of the same type have a distinction between upper and lower positions, G.M. positions, which is difficult to explain in real-life storylines. Is it reasonable for a lower-level Gulong to have more health than a higher-level de Guanyao Kai, as well as multiplayer monsters doubling their health? I will recalibrate the threat levels of some monsters, especially Gulong. Please don't worry about questions like, in the game, this monster can complete a 4-star mission. How did it become 7, 8, or 9 stars here? That's you. Steel Dragon. Chapter 1. Wild Boar or Male Fire Dragon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Shaded by trees, densely covered with streams, and fertile to an unsightly dark humus soil. The decaying trunk of the tree, covered in moss and lying on the ground in all directions. This is the deep forest of the Shurit area, where even sunlight is difficult to penetrate. There is no place more suitable for mushroom growth than here. On the moss that sucked in last night's rain like a sea of sponge, large patches of specialty mushrooms were stacked layer by layer. The flesh-red umbrella cover was soft, tender, and thick, and its delicious taste was beyond doubt. Humph. A vague hum came, and a figure squeezed out from the bushes in the forest. This is a plump wild boar with a spine height of over 1 meter, its brown-black fur covered in semi-dry mud, as if wearing layers of armor. The wild boar came to the wooden stump covered in mushrooms with a humming sound. Its pointed nose sniffed left and right twice before it began to bite recklessly. In no time, the large mushrooms that had just grown on the wooden stake were arched into a mess. Tisk. In the shadow of the dense forest, a slight click of the tongue sounded, unnoticed by the wild boar busy enjoying delicious food. I was wondering if it's possible to collect some specialty mushrooms and go back. It's all ruined now. Behind a large tree covered in vines, a young hunter dressed in lightweight leather armor muttered silently. Never mind, once I finish this assessment task, I will be the official hunter. There's no need to get angry over a few mushrooms, Gordon comforted himself in his heart. He took a slow breath, allowing his emotions and breath to completely calm down. First, check if the surroundings are safe. In the stream, the shadow of the tree crown, the deep of the vine, the chirping of insects, the smell brought by the wind, eyes, ears, nose, and even skin are carefully and efficiently collecting clues from the environment. A few seconds later, Gordon confirmed that there were no other large organisms present within a range of at least 10 meters. You can start hunting now. He tightened the strap on his right arm shield, and the bone-cutting sword named Hunter's Knife was also pulled out of the scabbard behind his waist and held tightly in his palm. His muscles tightened like a stretched bowstring, and the next second, he rushed out like a leopard. Humph. The big wild boar with mushroom shards hanging at the corner of its mouth raised its head alertly. Its huge head still hadn't had time to turn in the direction of the sound. The attacker had already crossed the distance of nearly 10 meters and rushed towards its side. He didn't stop and didn't directly cut, but instead used the round shield that could barely cover the vital parts of his chest and abdomen as the angle of attack, and hit the side of the wild boar with a fit. Gah! Even a large wild boar with a low and stable center of gravity cannot avoid stumbling under this full-force collision and being unable to counterattack in the first place. But Gordon had already raised his shield and swung his knife, firmly cutting into the relatively soft back of the wild boar's flesh. The hunter's small blade, covered in fine and sharp teeth, smoothly broke through the defenses of mud and fur. Blood splattered and the fat, muscles, and tendons were cut open. The wild boar's hind limbs softened and it howled and fell to the ground. The pig's thrust, which relies on the strength of its hind legs, is the only way for the wild boar to attack. This kind of blow may not be directly fatal, but it destroys its hind limbs and completely cuts off its resistance. The following scene is quite cruel. Gah. With a mournful howl, the wild boar's eyes completely lost their vitality, leaving only its strong body, still twitching slightly in a reflex-like manner. Throwing away the blood from the blade, Gordon sheathed the blade. He stood up and cautiously looked around a few times, confirming that there was no danger. Then he squatted down again, pulled out his skinning knife, and began collecting the body of the wild boar. Decades later, he selectively cut off a large piece of raw meat with better quality, and then pulled out a half-meter-long fawn. As for the most valuable fur, due to several knife marks, it cannot be sold at a good price, and carrying it with you before the task is completed is also troublesome, so you can only give up. Putting the raw meat and fangs into his backpack, Gordon quickly washed his hands and knives stained with blood by the creek, and then hurriedly left. The smell of blood and corpses will soon attract predators like the blue velociraptor, and staying here can be troublesome. After a rapid journey, over half an hour later, Gordon returned to the hunter's camp built amidst the boulders. It wasn't until the short body crawled through the narrow passage like a dog hole and saw the simple yet sturdy yellow animal skin tent that the young man finally breathed a sigh of relief. Returning to the campsite will be completely safe. Take out the fangs and raw meat from the backpack, the former being the settlement item for confirming the results of the expedition, and store them in the red storage box inside the camp. The latter is marinated with seasoning and prepared to be roasted and eaten later, which can also be considered as a dental ritual. After all, although the portable ingredients provided by the Hunter Guild can quickly fill the stomach, the taste is really hard to praise. This portable food made from a mixture of wheat flour and pickled meat, tastes like wood soaked in salt water by comparison. Grilled meat that is cooked until golden brown and sizzling with oil is much more delicious. Recalling the beautiful barbecue, Gordon swallowed his saliva hard and quickly set up a grill, patiently grilling this fresh raw meat that still carried residual warmth. If you want to grill delicious grilled meat that is charred on the outside and tender on the inside, you can't be impatient, and controlling the heat is even more important. The young man slowly turned the grip of the barbecue grill while taking out his thin hunter notes. Flip to the latest page. Assessment task. Disgusting wild boar herds task content. Conquer 5 wild boars remuneration. 300Z designated location. Schuitzen Hill time limit. 3 days. The wild boar population in Zayalitzen Hill is breeding abnormally. The number of wild boars in Zhaoshuyuan.com is increasing too quickly. Please make sure to reduce their numbers to avoid damaging the ecology of the Zayalitzen Hill area and affecting the surrounding human gathering areas. I took out a charcoal pen and recorded a few strokes. Including the one just now, he has hunted 4 big wild boars in the past 2 days. Hunting another one will complete the task and return to the village. The most important thing is, at that time, after passing the assessment task, I will finally be able to discard the prefix apprentice and officially become a monster hunter. It has been a full 2 years since I officially started receiving hunter training at the age of 15. It's time to graduate. Thinking of this, Gordon's lips couldn't help but rise. The wild boar, blue velociraptor, and bobo, mammoth, which have hunted for less than 100 fish in the past 2 years, but also have 70.80 fish monsters, are not worth recording in the hunter's notes. Only true flying dragons like the male dragon. This is the glory that hunters long for. A burnt smell woke him up from his beautiful delusions. Gordon, who had just discovered that the meat had been grilled on fire, hurriedly took it off the grill. Fortunately, it was only slightly burnt. This small matter won't affect his good mood. As he forcefully tore at the hot roasted meat with a slight burnt smell, the boy lifted his head and looked at the sun still hanging high in the air. It's still early, at least 3 hours before sunset. Accelerate the pace, wolf down the food, and after a few minutes, throw the cleaned bone aside. Gordon pats his swollen stomach and stands up. Eat and drink enough, strike while the iron is hot. Complete the hunt before it gets dark. Chapter 2. Task Completion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Gordon's body flexibly traversed through the complex terrain of the dense forest, and the corners of his mouth tightened tightly. The previous success seemed to have exhausted his good luck. It had been over 2 hours since he left the camp, and he had just discovered a trail of wild boars passing by. Looking up at the sky. Although the sun has not completely set, the light has dimmed a lot. If you want to finish hunting before nightfall, there is not much time left. Night hunting is not entirely impossible, and even in the dark, one who has undergone complete hunter training can still move freely. Lightson Hill is home to too many nocturnal animals, even monsters. Compared to the daytime, the danger of hunting at night is undoubtedly several levels higher. There are 2 choices before him at this moment. One is to give up tracking and immediately return to the camp. We will start hunting after dawn tomorrow. After all, the 3-day deadline for the mission has only passed 2 days. As long as we complete the expedition task before the end of tomorrow, there will be no problem. The second is to continue tracking the trail of the wild boar and complete the task as soon as possible. Whether it was the guidance of the previous instructors or the rationality in his heart, Gordon was told that returning to the camp at this time was the best choice. But another idea also boiled in his mind. What's wrong with hunting at night? I'm afraid. I don't even have the courage to hunt flying dragons in the future. Without hesitation for a few seconds, Gordon, who was at his most impulsive age, decided to be reckless. He even found an excuse in his heart for himself. What if I have bad luck tomorrow and can't find a big wild boar all day? Isn't the mission about to fail? I am not impulsive, but a mature choice made after careful consideration based on the actual situation. Gordon, who had made the decision, packed his entire outfit, quickened his pace, and plunged into the depths of the dark and ancient dense forest. After more than half an hour, the forest completely darkened. Due to vegetation cover, nights in the jungle always come faster. In the dim light, the branches and vines were faintly visible, the strange chirping of night owls came and went, and fireflies fluttered sporadically like ghostly flames. Even those with less courage, if they just stood here, might scream out. But Gordon was very excited. At this moment, he was squatting on the ground, checking the footprints of a large wild boar. The footprints are very fresh, that guy is nearby. Gordon twisted the soft soil at the edge of the footprints with his fingers, and couldn't help but grin. Hunting is not just about combat. Intelligence collection, preparation of equipment and props, and tracking of traces are all important components of the hunting process. Since he has identified the target, he has full confidence in solving it cleanly. Slightly lower your body, bend your knees, and press your feet almost firmly against the ground, alternating between stepping forward. This way of traveling is not fast, but it can avoid making noise to the greatest extent, attract the attention and vigilance of the target, and facilitate seizing the opportunity. Gordon silently searched forward, and soon the target appeared in his sight. This is a solitary wild boar, not very large in size and with short fangs. It should be a female individual, making it easier to deal with than the one I encountered before. As long as you kill it, you can complete the task yourself, pass the assessment, and become a formal hunter. Thinking of this, Gordon's heart began to accelerate uncontrollably. The instructor's instruction that one must carefully observe and confirm the surrounding environment before hunting began was forgotten by him. After quickly scanning around and confirming that there were no other creatures in sight, Gordon decisively began to launch an attack. The plan is the same as before, charging close, the shield colliding into the hand, disrupting the target's balance, and then launching a continuous slash to solve the battle. The young hunter is full of confidence. However, this time, the situation did not develop as he had planned. Perhaps it is because the distance is not close enough, or it may be because the target is not eating at this time, and their vigilance is quite high. As early as the moment he rushed out of the shadow, the slightly drowsy wild boar turned its head towards him and began to scratch its hind hooves, preparing to charge. Tisk! During the charge, Gordon licked his tongue and hit the unprepared wild boar from the side, which was naturally fine, but facing these guys and charging was foolish. However, not being able to gain an advantage does not mean falling into a disadvantage, it just makes the battle process a bit more complicated. The pace changed, and the legs that were originally charging at full speed lost 3 points of their strength. At the moment when he was about to collide with the wild boar, Gordon crossed his legs and spun, making way for him. While passing the wild boar in the wrong direction, he made a cut on the latter's buttocks. The wild boar let out a scream and stopped in its tracks. Gordon wouldn't miss such a good opportunity, but as he approached, he swung several knives in succession, hitting the hind leg of the wild boar just to disable its collision ability. Unexpectedly, the big wild boar exerted force on its forelimbs and suddenly swung its head backwards, with short, knife-like fangs thrusting towards him. Gordon was somewhat surprised, but not panicked. He lifted the shield of his right arm and met him. This is the main reason why novice hunters commonly use sharpshooters. Lightweight, flexible, and not outstanding in both attack and defense, yet very balanced. Faced with unexpected situations, the switch between attack and defense is quick and easy. Ha! Fang and bone shield collided, and Gordon firmly blocked the blow. On the contrary, the heavily injured wild boar stumbled backwards. Under the impact, although the right arm of the shield was slightly numb, it did not affect his subsequent attack. The hunter's knife, which was about half a meter long, was in his hand, as light as a feather. It swung vertically, horizontally, and turned around to slay, unleashing a series of combos in an instant. Humph, humph. The wild boars that were hit by knives one after another let out a brutal howl that echoed through the mountains and forests. Of course, Gordon would not sympathize with this and waved his weapons continuously, launching slashes. Until it completely collapses. Compared to the previous one, the death of this wild boar is much more tragic. There were not many good skins on the body with sharp cuts, and blood splattered everywhere. Standing on the side, Gordon was panting heavily, and even with his outstanding physical fitness, he was struggling with this series of full-force attacks. Fortunately, the hunting has ended. Next, all you need to do is collect the wild boar's fangs and bring them back to the campsite. Taking a few breaths, Gordon was about to walk towards the corpse of the wild boar when his body suddenly froze. He could feel a dangerous and malicious gaze locking him in. Ignoring the corpses of the wild boar on the side, Gordon suddenly turned around and looked towards a certain direction. He raised his arm and placed a round shield in front of him, gripping the hunting knife tightly in his hand, fully alert. Heavy breathing, heavy footsteps that made the ground tremble slightly, and the crackling sound of trees breaking. A huge black shadow slowly emerged from among the trees. The first thing that caught his eye was a massive fang that was thicker than the trees. Faced with these huge teeth, Gordon couldn't help but think. Is this really something that can grow naturally from living organisms? Giant teeth are not smooth and beautiful, and their thickness is uneven, even asymmetrical on both sides. But the spiral patterns that seem to be made of steel bars twisted by huge machinery, full of a sense of power, carry a wild tension that cannot be ignored. Dos Van Gogh. Gordon swallowed his saliva secretly. He certainly knew this guy, the king of the wild boar tribe, a monster named Fierce General, by hunters. Big Wild Pig King. Chapter 3. Have you been carved by the wild boar king cat? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, with a spine height of over 250 centimeters and a body weight measured in tons, it is unbelievable that it belongs to the same species as the wild boar. The high and sturdy back is like a small mountain. The wedge-shaped protrusions on both sides of the spine, resembling horns, are actually thick enough to pierce the surface of the spine. Coupled with the twisted and clumped muscles, they can unleash terrifying force like a mountain flood at any time. 2 streams of white steam spewed out from its nostrils, which was a precursor to the fierce anger of the fierce general. The corner of his eye scanned the pitiful female wild boar not far away, causing Gordon to feel bitter in his mouth. I'm afraid I might have killed someone else's mistress, so no wonder this guy is so angry. Can't turn around. At present, running away is the way to death, and the speed of human straight-line running cannot match that of the great wild boar king. Dealing with it, finding the right time is the only choice. Adjusting his breathing to calm himself down, Gordon covered himself with a shield and, with minimal movement, pulled out an egg-sized spherical prop from his backpack. He really hopes that it's a sonic boom or a flash bomb, and those cute little things can buy him a lot of time. Unfortunately, he did not bring such expensive items, or rather expensive items for him as a trainee hunter. This is just the most ordinary staining ball. With a flick of his arm, the dye ball accurately hit the back of the wild boar king, spraying a large amount of paint like fluorescent red liquid, covering his fur. At the same time, a pungent odor diffused in the air. This is a prop used by hunters to mark target monsters. Specially trained monster hunters can accurately track targets by identifying odors, tracking paint droplets on the ground, and rubbing against rocks and vegetation. Of course, Gordon's purpose in throwing the dye ball at this point is not just for tracking, but rather to further anger the wild boar king and force him to launch an attack. The most terrifying thing is the arrow that has not been shot from the string. For the wild boar king, this blow did not cause any harm, but it was extremely insulting. It's about like soaking heavily flavored urine on its head. The huge fangs violently swayed a few times with the movement of the wild boar king's head. Its short yet sturdy and powerful forelimbs were scraping the ground, causing it to howl and bow like a steam locomotive, roaring towards Gordon. Suppressing the impulse and fear of flying towards one side in his heart, Gordon kept telling himself that the time was not yet right. Once the rolling motion is too early and gives the monster the distance to adjust its direction, and you haven't had time to get up yet, it is a catastrophic disaster. The young hunter lowered his body, his muscles taut, and stared intently at the approaching giant beast. Right now. The tense body popped out like a spring. Gordon pounced and rolled towards the right, successfully avoiding this deadly blow. The fierce airflow driven by the body of the wild boar king even blew up the grass, leaving the area in disarray. Without waiting for him to breathe a sigh of relief, Gordon, who had just finished rolling and had not even had time to fully get up, felt a strong wind coming from behind. The wild boar king, who failed to hit the collision, stopped in time, turned around and raised his huge fangs, waving towards the hunter. Damn it! Even though its body is several times larger, its flexibility is so much higher than that of an ordinary wild boar. Gordon gritted his teeth and blocked the shield in front of him, barely making an impact-resistant position before flying backwards like a kicked ball. Gordon, who had fallen to the ground and failed to complete his receiving position, felt a buzzing sound in his brain, and his right arm, which was holding the shield, experienced a sharp pain like a rupture. He felt like he had fallen apart and wanted to lie on the ground and catch his breath, but he knew it wasn't the right time. The wild boar king's once again full-force pig thrust is already in front of him. At this moment it was too late to get up, and Gordon could only roll a few laps to one side with all his strength. Finally, he reluctantly dodged this another surprise attack. However, how long will the next attack come? In 1 second. Or 2 seconds later. Are you going to die here? Just as Gordon, who had no room to stand up, was about to fall into despair, a roar of broken trees and the howling of the wild boar king came from not far behind him. Gordon, who didn't know what had happened but finally gained some breathing space, stood up in agony and realized that luck seemed to favor him this time. In a fit of anger, the wild boar king, who had lost his wits, unexpectedly bumped into a giant tree that was thick enough for 2 people to embrace. The most outrageous thing is that the tree was even knocked off. However, the wild boar king is clearly not doing well either. The footsteps swayed and swayed as if drunk, as if in a state of dizziness. This is undoubtedly the best time to escape. However, Gordon once again stopped the idea of turning around and running. From the movement of the wild boar king vigorously shaking its head, it can be seen that after a few seconds at most, it will recover from its dizzy state. How far can I run during this period? 10 meters. Or 20 meters. Indeed, moving in the lush jungle, my agile figure gave me an advantage over the wide and chubby big boar king, but now I am also injured, and my right arm may even be broken. Can you really run away by running directly? We must cause some injury to the wild boar king, at least to hinder its movement. Gordon vented his fear with a roar, gripping the hunter's knife tightly in his left hand and charging towards the great boar king, aiming at his Achilles tendon in the hind legs. Without leaving any room for effort, he swung what may have been his heaviest strike since receiving hunter training at EP1-10. The heel without thick fur coverage is indeed one of the weaker defensive parts of the wild boar king, but that is only relative. Rather than swinging, it was more like a hunter's knife slashing and smashing, successfully cutting through the not too thick layer of skin, but not cutting off the Achilles tendon of the wild boar king as Gordon had hoped. The blade only barely penetrated halfway, but was firmly stuck by the rock-hard muscles and Achilles tendon. But this knife really hurt the wild pig king. Just as it regained consciousness, it let out a scream of agony. Supported by an unimaginable terrifying core force, it suddenly turned back and shook its head, and its thick fangs once again flew Gordon away. Under the tremendous impact, Gordon, who had fallen to the ground, couldn't help but spurt out a mouthful of blood. Gordon, whose entire strength had been shaken away, gritted his teeth and tried to lift his head, staring intently at the incoming wild boar king with gradually blurred vision. The law of the jungle is natural. Since one is unable to achieve victory, as a loser, witnessing the end of one's life with one's own eyes is also a kind of outcome. However, just as the young hunter was about to be trampled into flesh and mud, a strange horn sounded. Doodle doodle doodle, the wild boar king turned his head irritably and was temporarily distracted. At the same time, several small figures, white and brown in color, approached Gordon lying on the ground with an agility that humans could not reach. He was lifted onto a simple wooden cart with all his hands and feet, and disappeared into the dark forest in the blink of an eye. Only the wild boar king, who had not regained his senses for a while, roared and vented his anger and unwillingness. Chapter 4. Underneath Beefsteak Meow. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, pain, pain, pain. When Gordon sat up holding his arm, it was already late at night. It is impossible to say that one is not surprised when one discovers that one, who was supposed to have died in a fierce battle with the wild boar king, is now lying well on the bed of the hunter camp, with his right arm even secured with a wooden board. He frowned and thought back for a while. The strange horn sound he heard before falling into a coma made him vaguely understand something. Meow. Are you awake, Meow? Are you okay? That's great, Meow. At that moment, a furry face with a pair of cute big eyes squeezed into his sight. How scared did Gordon blurt out, AI? AI Lou. It's impolite, Meow. If it weren't for our timely assistance, you would have been trampled into a pancake by that big fat pig, Meow. Faced with Gordon's surprise, the owner of that face appeared somewhat dissatisfied. "Ah, I'm sorry, oh no, I should say thank you very much for your help." After being surprised, Gordon immediately sat up straight and officially thanked the little guys around the bed. They are telling the truth that in front of the wild boar king, one who has lost the ability to move, is definitely dead and lifeless. Elu, also known as Elu cat, belongs to the orc species like the Kimian tribe. Compared to the cruel and rebellious Chimian tribe, the gentle and hard-working Ailu have a very close relationship with humans. These little guys who stand up over half a meter tall, like humans, are accustomed to walking on both feet and have very flexible hands. They can use various tools and even weapons. They produce and live together with humans, and their presence is often seen in human settlements, even in remote and impoverished areas like Kokot village. However, judging from their clothing and the cleanliness of their fur, these Ailu who saved their lives should not be those who live in human villages or towns, but rather a group of people living in the wild. That's pretty much Meow. Seemingly satisfied with Gordon's sincere thank-you attitude, a larger, seemingly leader-looking Elu cat hugged its paws and nodded in satisfaction. Then he extended his little paw towards Gordon. According to the agreement with the Hunter Guild, Meow has the right to receive a reward equivalent to 1/3 of the mission reward from the hunter who saved Elu in the hunting ground. Looking at the little paw in front of him, Gordon recalled that the instructor seemed to have indeed mentioned this to him. Elu is petite and agile, able to climb trees and drill holes, making it difficult for monsters to truly harm them. Considering the close nature of Elu to humans, the Hunter Guild discussed with the Elu tribe. When they encounter a hunter in crisis in the wild, lend a helping hand at the cost of a portion of the hunter's reward. All hunters naturally wish to raise their hands and feet in agreement with this. Although the chance of encountering Ailu to save lives is purely a matter of luck, even if it's just a possibility, it's still a good thing. It's about life. No one would be stingy with that money, and Gordon is no exception. But he looked at the carefully bandaged wound on his body and felt very embarrassed. As he is receiving assessment tasks, the salary is only a symbolic 300 Z, 1/3 of which is 100 Z. If he eats a more luxurious set meal in a restaurant, the fee is about 100 Z. That is to say, I bought my life with the money from a meal. After showing the leader of Ailu cat his task list, the former's expression visibly stiffened, and the originally upright triangular ears also drooped. It let out a sigh of old age and said, "Luck is really bad, Meow, but the rules are the rules. Mr. Hunter only needs to pay 100 Z to get it, Meow." Gordon Nene handed out the coins, and even though he was the one taking advantage of them, he still felt it was too much. "The reward has been received, Mr. Hunter, please rest well, Meow." Captain Elu put away the coins and prepared to leave with the disheartened tribe. "Ah, sorry, please wait a moment." Gordon suddenly remembered something and called out to the Elu cats who were about to leave, then quickly walked to the storage box and searched for them. Inside are various materials he collected along the way during the past 2 days of hunting. Minerals, herbs, mushrooms, bone materials, insect materials, there is everything. This is a habit that most hunters have, on the one hand, to accumulate the materials needed for equipment and props, and on the other hand, to earn some extra income. After a moment, Gordon took out a few seemingly ordinary fresh branches, and Elu's eyes lit up instantly as they looked at the things in his hands. Meow. Mu Tian Meow. Surprisingly, it's the Mu Tian Meow Meow. This plant is just one of the ordinary medicinal herbs for humans, but it is an extremely precious luxury item in the eyes of Ailu cat, probably like the high-end wine in the eyes of alcoholics. Handing the wooden polygonum to the Ilas, Gordon scratched the back of his head and said, "Although it cannot be used as a reward, it can only be said to be a small gesture of gratitude. My name is Gordon. Although I am just a minor apprentice hunter, if anyone needs help, come to Kokot village and find me. I will do my best." The leader of Elu excitedly patted Gordon's thigh with his little paw and loudly said, "Mr. Hunter, you're a great person, Meow. I'll call you a steak, Meow. If there's a chance in the future, welcome to our place as a guest, Meow. Gordon also bent down, grabbed the paw of the steak, and smiled, saying, "That's a deal." Both sides bid farewell again, and the Ailu people left with the wooden polygonum bungee jumping, and the hunter camp became quiet again. Returning to the bedside inside the tent, Gordon took a slow breath. Zhaozhuyuan.com. First, take out the only 3 bottles of recovery medicine from the travel bag, drink it in one breath, cough hard a few times, cough up the congestion in the trachea, and sit quietly for a while. The right arm and internal organs, which were originally in severe pain, suddenly feel much more comfortable. This does not mean that the injury has already healed. 3 bottles of the most basic recovery medicine are not enough to cure all of his injuries, including the right arm fracture, let alone the complete effectiveness of these drugs, which will take some time. Now he is once again facing a choice. Due to the appearance of the wild boar king, he was unable to collect the last wild boar's fang, and the expedition task was not completed. Unlike ordinary wild boars, as the leader of the tribe, the king of wild boars has a certain degree of intelligence. Under its call, at least within the mission time limit, he is unlikely to encounter a lone wild boar again. Give up the task. Returning to the village to explain the situation, the appearance of the wild boar king during the campaign was an accident, and no one would blame him. The assessment task can also wait for another year, as he is still young. Taking a strong breath, Gordon lay heavily on the bed inside the tent, staring blankly at the top of the tent. Alternatively, you can directly hunt the wild boar king and use its fangs as part of the mission item to exceed the target. Gordon flipped over and sat up. To be honest, even he himself was taken aback by the overestimation of this idea. Take the shardade sword leaning against the foot of the bed. On the round shield, a crack almost ran across the entire shield surface, and no one knew how many more impacts it could withstand. The bone hunter's knife is still sharp, but when it swung on the body of the wild boar king, the feeling of almost bouncing back as if it had hit the rocks was also unsettling. Is it really possible for oneself to hunt the wild boar king? Chapter 5. Human Courage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, looking at my calluses, thick bones, much rougher than my peers, yet much more powerful hands. The right hand, which had not yet healed from the injury, still trembled slightly, as if reflecting on the fear deep within him that he didn't even want to face. Are you afraid of being pierced by those fangs? Are you afraid of being crushed by those giant hooves? I am just a novice hunter who is just 17 years old and has not yet become a regular. It's normal that I can't defeat the wild boar king, right? I'll find a place when I'm strong, won't I? Gordon tried to comfort himself, but such thoughts made the knot in his heart even heavier. It's even more uncomfortable than the congestion stuck in the throat just now. Take out your own hunter notes and gaze at the Hunter Guild emblem imprinted on the animal skin cover. When the profession of hunter had not yet appeared on this land, how did those ancestors face monsters that human beings could not resist with such a mentality? Without sturdy armor and sharp weapons. Without the support of various props and intelligence. There is no way out to regain the field after becoming stronger. Only the tribe members who must be guarded behind their homeland, and the courage to be forced out. What about myself? Has one's courage been completely shattered by the pig thrust of the wild boar king? Even if I switch to sharper weapons and stronger armor later on, won't my hands shake anymore? After retreating this time, do you really have the courage to stand in front of that guy again, or even take the initiative to charge? Walking outside the tent, under the bright starlight, Gordon once again looked at the hunter's knife that had accompanied him for a whole year in his hand. The blade is not sharp enough, but it can still leave scars on the great boar king. The shield cracked but stubbornly remained intact. Close your eyes. Wearing thin armor and holding rudimentary knives, yet still shouting, the backs of the pioneers who charged towards the monsters come to mind one after another. A subtle yet bright emotion, like firewood, bursts from the depths of the soul. It's not fear, not impulse, not hysterical recklessness, but something more passionate. Gordon opened his eyes and looked at his still numb but no longer trembling right hand, unconsciously muttering to himself. Is this courage? I patted my cheek hard until 2 ridiculous red handprints appeared on my face. Put away the notebook symbolizing the hunter's identity, sheath the blade, re-tie the round shield to the right arm, and tighten the strap. Then, let's start again. 2 hours later, Gordon returned to the camp. The effect of the dying ball allows him to roughly grasp the direction and distance of the wild boar king. He did not choose to approach the opponent recklessly, and he still needs to prepare before the formal battle begins. During the time he left the camp, he searched the nearby mountains and forests, striving to collect all the materials that could be used. These seemingly insignificant things may become important weights in future battles. At this moment, he was sitting cross-legged on the ground inside the tent, tidying up the mess in front of him. 7 herbs, a few pieces of honey, 1 patience seed, 4 blue mushrooms, 3 poisonous mushrooms, 2 paralyzed mushrooms. Some of these materials were just collected by him, while others were stored in the storage box after being collected 2 days ago. First, reply with the medicine. Gordon used a stone mortar to crush and mix all the herbs and blue mushrooms, added a small amount of water, stirred thoroughly, and filtered. The final green liquid obtained is the most basic recovery medicine. Although the material ratio is not quite right and has not been properly extracted and blended, the medicine cannot achieve the optimal effect. However, time is tight and there is no time to dwell on so much. Moreover, I was lucky enough to find a beehive and cut back a lot of honey. According to the instructor's secret recipe, he added a large amount of honey to the recovery medicine, which can greatly improve its effectiveness and make the bitter medicine taste better. The amount of recovery medicine that has not been extracted and concentrated is a bit too much. Looking at the medicine filled with an iron pot for boiling soup, Gordon feels a bit numb. After pouring half a pot with a stiff scalp and neck, Gordon let out a loud burp. These crude restorative medicines are indeed not as effective as those carefully mixed and stored in small glass bottles. They take effect quickly and are superior in large quantities. After drinking the medicine for more than half an hour, he felt that the pain in his right arm had almost completely disappeared, and the dull pain caused by the impact on his organs no longer existed. With a little more rest, you should be able to recover to your full potential. He poured all the remaining potions into the water bag for later use. As a local specialty, he also utilized a bunch of messy mushrooms. He used to belong to the martial arts sect that disdained the excessive use of props, but now his idea has changed. The method that can improve the success rate of hunting is a good one. Many hunters like to use seasoned raw meat to attract monsters, lure them to eat it, and achieve the goal of weakening them. For example, paralyzing raw meat, highly toxic raw meat, and so on may sound very vulgar, but they are very effective hunting methods. The wild boar king is an omnivorous monster that also eats meat, but their favorite is the mushrooms that can be seen everywhere in the forest after the rain. Gordon decided to use this as a trap for the wild boar king. It's best to succeed, but there's no loss if you don't succeed. However, it is not so easy to deceive those who have lived in the jungle for generations, feed on mushrooms, and have a more sensitive sense of smell than dogs. Paralyzing mushrooms, poisonous mushrooms, and so on. Although they are also mushrooms, if placed in front of them, they will definitely not even glance at them. A certain degree of disguise must be applied. For this, Gordon specifically dug out the most expensive settlement item he had collected in the past few days from the storage box. The large matsutake. This unique mushroom growing deep in the Shuritsen hill has an extremely rich and fragrant nutty aroma. It is not only for humans, but also a rare and exquisite delicacy for the wild boar king. Just one piece alone can sell for a price several times higher than the reward for this mission, and being able to collect it is as lucky as winning a lottery. Gordon endured heartache and chopped up all the large matsutake mushrooms. He mixed the thick and fragrant mushroom paste with sticky honey, and then applied a thick layer on the pile of poisonous mushrooms, paralyzed mushrooms, and sleeping mushrooms. I hope to deceive the smell of the wild boar king. As for its appearance, it doesn't matter. Everyone knows that wild boars arch their noses when foraging, and when they smell something that suits their appetite, they just pout without even using their eyes. After finishing his sinister bait, Gordon carefully crushed a poisonous mushroom he had intentionally left behind, and evenly spread the purple-black juice onto his hunter's knife. This poisonous mushroom contains a deadly poison that has a certain effect on humans and monsters. According to the instructor, some hunter weapons use special monster materials rich in highly toxic substances to attach a poison attribute to their attacks, weakening the physical strength of the hunting target. My own shallow method, which cannot even be considered as poisoning, cannot be compared to those advanced weapons, but as long as it can cause a little more trouble to the wild boar king, it is worth it. Looking at the sky, there are still about 4 to 5 hours before dawn. Gordon lay down on the bed. Even though he was mentally excited and his thoughts struggled to fall asleep, he still closed his eyes forcefully, trying to force himself to sleep. For future hunting, he must reserve his stamina and recover from injuries. 1 Ilu, 2 Ilu, 3 Ilu. A few minutes later, inside the narrow tent, only a slight snoring echoed lightly. Chapter 6. Mushrooms are toxic. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. As the sky turned gray, Gordon got up from bed on time. He moved his right arm, relaxed and agile, and twisted his waist again. The crisp crackling sound told him that the bone injury had healed. After bouncing vigorously a few more times, there was no dull pain or feeling of boredom in the chest or abdominal cavity, indicating that the body's condition had returned to its optimal state. With a fist slap and solid strength, he grinned contentedly. Take out a few pieces of food and fill your stomach with water. Wearing the components of the hunter suit one by one, Gordon equipped himself with a round shield and carefully polished the hunter's knife with a grinding stone. After completing all of this, Gordon walked out of the tent. The hunter's knife emits a dark purple color unique to dried poisonous mushroom juice, and the water bag is filled with crude recovery medicine, full of substance. As the core part of the operation, the black heart matsutake is wrapped in large leaves and carefully placed in the backpack. Take a long breath. Facing the rising sun, Gordon strode to the entrance of the campsite and, like a truly seasoned hunter, embarked on his first ruthless hunting in his life. More than an hour has passed. Gordon is not in a hurry, only with enough patience can he discover the clues of the monster's whereabouts. Now, he has made a discovery. Stroking the trace of dye ball pigment on the tree trunk, Gordon sniffed and tried to distinguish the residual scent of dyed fruits in the air. And this confirms the position and distance of the wild boar king at this time. More than 10 hours have passed since the battle last night, and the duration of the dye ball has basically reached its limit. Fortunately, it didn't rain last night, otherwise the effectiveness of the dyeing ball would have been greatly reduced, and the traces and odor left by the paint would have been washed away. In that way, I will truly become a headless fly. In the northeast direction, the distance is about 2 to 3 kilometers. Where is the stream with a lot of mushrooms? Good luck. Gordon's eyes lit up and he muttered to himself. Over the past 2 years, he has spent at least 1/3 of his time on the outskirts of this Shuritzen hill. Not to mention being familiar with every plant and tree, he still has a clear understanding of the environment, terrain, and products of each area. The area where the wild boar king is currently located is relatively flat with dense streams, making it one of the best mushroom gathering points nearby. It is highly likely that the other party is foraging nearby. This will greatly improve the success rate of drugging operations. The pace began to accelerate. He must set up the poison bait before the wild boar king is full. After more than half an hour of driving, the faint smell of dye balls in the air gradually became continuous and obvious. Gordon knows that he is not far from the target. Remove the helmet and use the sensitive skin on the cheeks and neck to instantly determine the direction of the wind at this time. Lucky enough, he is at a disadvantage. As long as he is careful, he can secretly approach the wild pig king without worrying about being discovered by the latter. Gordon slowly continued to approach. This time, he learned from last night's lesson and carefully explored the situation in the surrounding area while circling forward. To be honest, he has some psychological shadows. Hunting a big wild boar, running out a big wild boar king. What strange things will run out when hunting a big wild boar king? Will he still live? Fortunately, during the day, Schuretzen Hill was relatively calm, with only a few slow-moving herbivorous dragons and only a timid spirit deer remaining larger than rabbits. Quietly probing, approaching, almost half an hour has passed. Gordon, who was crawling and lurking among the bushes, once again saw the massive and majestic figure. The wild boar king leisurely strolled among the streams and plants, searching for delicious berries and mushrooms. Its left hind leg seems to be somewhat abnormal, with a shorter landing time compared to its right leg when walking, which makes Gordon feel a bit pleased. The knife that I desperately hit last night ultimately injured the Achilles tendon of the wild boar king. With my own recovery ability, just one night is not enough to completely heal the wound. This may be an opportunity for him. Gordon did not rush out recklessly. Since there is a gap in hard power, he must be cautious. It is not yet time for a direct battle. After observing for a while and confirming the general route of the wild boar king, Gordon quietly retreated. He wants to rush to the next foraging spot of the wild boar king first and set it up. A few minutes later, Gordon arrived at a clearing in the woods. There are many fallen pine trees here, with broken trunks and protruding roots. These trees have already withered away, but they still live in another way. Everything in the forest has its value, and decaying wood is no exception. Whether it's the soft and thick moss that completely covers the rotten wood, or the clumps of mushrooms, they are all the favorite foods of the wild boar king. The large matsutake, revered as a treasure in the forest by foodies, can occasionally be collected nearby. Gordon has at least 70% confidence that the wild boar king will soon pass by here and enjoy delicious food. Grab a handful of moss from the nearby tree with a slightly pungent odor, and wipe it hard on your hands and feet a few times to eliminate the human odor and prevent the wild boar king from discovering a flaw later. I found a tree stump where I had collected large matsutake mushrooms in the past. After burying the paralyzed and poisonous mushrooms disguised as large matsutake mushrooms, Gordon cleared the traces and left silently. The scent of the large matsutake that was chopped and applied to these poisonous baits was strong enough, and Gordon believed that even if buried in the soil, the wild boar king would accurately locate it. To be honest, Gordon has no idea whether this will deceive the keen sense of the wild boar king and whether the poison bait will work after being eaten. If it doesn't work, everything will have to be handed over to the hunter's knife in hand. Zhaozuiyuan.com. Glancing around, he found a downwind shrub to lurk, and all he could do was wait. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. As time passed by, Gordon repeatedly told himself in his heart to be patient, but even so, his emotions inevitably began to become restless. Just as he was about to give up, the heavy footsteps of the wild boar king could be heard from afar. Gordon felt his heartbeat start to become rapid. He quickly adjusted his breathing, trying to suppress his heartbeat and panting, like a real wooden stake, lying motionless behind the bushes. The wild boar king's nose twitched around. It seems to have faintly smelled the smell of that despicable human. But compared to the elusive scent, an intoxicating aroma that often appears in its dreams is more concerning to it. It is the aroma of matsutake. Even if it is the king of the entire tribe, it doesn't often have the opportunity to eat that delicious matsutake. When was the last time I tasted this delicious food? It seems like autumn before the breeding season. That sweet taste is truly unforgettable. Following the fragrance, the wild boar king ran all the way to the tree stump. The long nose easily arches open the floating soil, revealing the delicious food buried under the soil. The aroma of the large matsutake suddenly became more intense. Unlike before, this time the large matsutake was mixed with the sweet aroma of honey. Snoring seems to have some other flavors mixed in. No matter what. The wild boar king opened his mouth wide and swallowed the delicious mushrooms in just a few bites. After a moment, the intermittent roar caused by abdominal pain and oral paralysis echoed through the entire mountain forest. Chapter 7. Greedy Knife Kills. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, the plan went incredibly smoothly. It's not surprising, to put it simply, it's just a survivorship bias. For monsters growing up in the wild, there is no concept of whether their food has been poisoned. And the unlucky ones who have been hit by the move will hardly survive until the moment when they pass on this painful experience to future generations. Even the wild boar king himself did not realize at this moment that someone had poisoned him. He simply thought that he had accidentally eaten the poisonous mushroom. It instinctively lies down, which is the most common method used by wild creatures when poisoned. Relying on its strong physique and metabolic ability to endure. A few numb mushrooms and poisonous mushrooms are not enough to kill it, at most it will be uncomfortable for a while. But Gordon won't give it a chance to recover well. Standing up from the bushes where he was hiding, he threw a dye ball at the big wild boar king's forehead, then turned around and ran. Faced with this sudden change, the wild boar king was stunned for 2 seconds before he realized it. Her small eyes turned red from congestion, and it roared as it climbed up and stepped forward, ready to charge towards the hateful figure, trampling him into meat patties. However, paralyzed mushrooms and poisonous mushrooms have already begun to take effect. It felt like its body was a bit disobedient. It didn't take a few steps forward and then leaned against the decaying wood scattered throughout the forest. In the splashing wood shavings, the roar of the wild boar king could not be stopped. This forced it to stop. Rather than solving that despicable guy, let's wait until our body returns to normal first. Shaking his big head, the pungent dye ball liquid was thrown everywhere, with a strong odor. Its sense of smell is greatly affected, and it can only rely on its less sensitive little eyes to scan the surroundings with vigilance, to prevent that guy from reappearing. A few minutes later, the despicable hunter did not appear. The big wild boar king, who thought the other party had already run far, lay down again and prepared to rest well and break down the toxins. When it had just lay down, lost in a daze, and just fallen asleep. An agile figure once again silently emerged from the shadows in the forest. Gordon approached the wild pig king from behind, holding a hunter's knife. Focus on the wound in the latter's leg that has not yet fully healed, adjust your breathing, accumulate strength, and in the next second, a continuous slash will erupt instantly. Go down. Go up. Chop again. 3 consecutive precise hits hit the initial wound, successfully tearing open the already hemostatic fissure once again, expanding and splattering blood. Oh, 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 oh. The wild boar king, awakened by the sudden and excruciating pain, howled and struggled to get up, but his once powerful limbs were now very uncoordinated, making it difficult to even roll over. And Gordon gritted his teeth and squeezed every bit of strength in his muscles, swinging his knife to the best of his ability, which was the best opportunity for an attack. He must cause enough serious harm to the other party in order to try to bridge the gap in hard power between the two. The fine serrations on the blade of the Piensho sword repeatedly cut open the skin and muscles of the wild boar king. Perhaps it was the effect of poisonous mushrooms, or maybe it was because the other party was resting and their muscles were relaxing. Gordon felt that the meat of the wild boar king seemed not as hard as yesterday. This is good news. In just a few seconds, the left hind leg of the wild boar king became blood and flesh blurred. The poisonous mushroom juice applied to the blade also infiltrated a small amount into the flesh and blood of the former's wound. These small toxins could not poison the large wild boar king, but could to some extent inhibit the healing of the wound. Roar, roar. The deafening roar made Gordon instinctively cover his ears. The wild boar king is once again furious. Steam like white smoke spurted out of its nostrils, and its eyes and nose began to turn red. With a large secretion of adrenaline, it temporarily regained control of its body, and its massive body, weighing in tons, bounced off the ground at an incredible speed. Gordon, who was affected by the roaring sound and did not respond immediately, was kicked by the back hoof of the wild boar king and stumbled back a few steps, almost falling. Fortunately, the wild boar king's hasty footwork was not very strong. Under the protection of his leather armor, Gordon felt as if he had been hit hard in the side ribs. The intense dull pain dazzled his eyes, but did not make him lose his mobility. At this moment, the wild boar king had already turned around. Its movements are like a tightly wound iron toy, 3 points faster than usual. Amidst the gasping sound, a huge fang that was even longer than Gordon's whole body thrust straight at him with the wild boar king's forceful movement of raising his head. Throw and roll towards the side and front with force. The astute movements developed through arduous training helped him avoid this deadly blow unexpectedly. After getting up, he even had time to turn around and give the wild boar king a knife, leaving a narrow and deep cut on his side. The wild boar king roared again. Giant fangs swept across, and Gordon jumped back in time to successfully resolve the great boar king's counterattack. Gordon grinned and a confident smile appeared on his face. He realized for the first time that the great wild boar king was not that scary either. The skin is rough and the flesh is thick, the power is extraordinary, the straight charge speed is extremely fast, and the turning speed is faster than the ordinary wild boar. These are all the advantages of the wild boar king. In terms of agility in small-scale rotation, one still has an advantage. That pair of heavy and long huge teeth, while having an advantage, are they also not a burden? I have roughly grasped the range of Fang's attack and found Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Next, I won't be so easily attacked by you. While the attacking wild boar king adjusted his posture, Gordon did not directly attack, but instead chose to push back a distance. Seeing the distance pulled apart, the wild boar king Guoduan launched a charge. Unlike the fear he had when facing the wild boar king and the pigs suddenly for the first time yesterday, at this moment, he could only remain calm in his heart. As the giant tooth was about to approach, Gordon rolled and dodged the pig's protrusion smoothly, but instead of getting up in a hurry, he continued to roll forward in a circle. The howling sound of the wild boar king's fangs waving in the air behind his ears made him know that he had guessed right. Once this guy charges and is dodged, he will immediately turn his head and wave his teeth to make up for a blow. Yesterday, he was hit by this move and was thrown out. And next, there will be a few seconds of gap. Even with the muscular strength of the wild boar king, after a series of actions such as continuous charging, forceful turning, and swinging his fangs, slight adjustments must be made. This is the time to launch your own attack. Gordon stepped closer and in the blink of an eye, he arrived at the position next to the head of the wild boar king. His two swift and sharp knives swung like lightning, adding 2 new wounds to the latter. Subsequently, he did not pursue the victory and continue to attack, but once again jumped back without hesitation. The words emphasized by the instructor countless times echoed in his mind. Monsters are not wooden targets and will not give you the opportunity to continue attacking. You need to know how to stop at a moderate level. At least half of the hunters who died in battle died on the greedy sword. As expected, just as he distanced himself, the wild boar king once again rudely swung his huge teeth and swept across the position where he had just stood. The strong wind from his huge fangs blew his hair, and Gordon chuckled and charged forward again. Chapter 8. Broken Giant Teeth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, the sun is gradually rising to the top sky, and the temperature is also constantly rising. The clothes under the armor were already soaked in sweat, but all my energy was focused on avoiding the attack of the wild boar king and searching for Gordon's attack loopholes, so I naturally didn't notice these. 10 minutes have passed since the battle officially began. The high-intensity rolling, dodging, and wielding of knives caused his physical fitness to decline very quickly, and the wild boar king, as a hunting target, naturally felt uncomfortable. The toxins of paralyzing mushrooms and poisonous mushrooms continue to act, causing their physical exertion to be faster. The knife wound covering the whole body may seem terrifying, but most of the wounds are not deep. The truly serious one is the wound on the left hind leg Achilles tendon. After the effect of adrenaline secretion caused by anger, the intense pain in the hind legs slows down its movements. The initial thought of having to crush his opponent into meat paste faded away a lot. After a several second-long confrontation, the panting wild boar king turned around and ran away. Gordon breathed a sigh of relief. He did not pursue immediately because his physical fitness had also dropped to a very dangerous level, and in previous battles, he was not unscathed. After briefly confirming the temporary safety of the surroundings, Gordon took out a water bag filled with recovery medicine and took a few firm sips. The palm pressed against the side ribs, and the less unbearable pain transmitted back from the ribs relieved him. I just got kicked by the wild boar king here. Even with armor protection, bruises are still certain, as long as the bones are not in any major way. The right shoulder was just rubbed against by the wild boar king's fang, and now it's swollen very high. Fortunately, it hasn't hurt the bones either. Taking a rest should relieve it. After taking out a piece of food and swallowing the healing medicine mixed with honey, Gordon took out a grinding stone and began to sharpen his knife. The originally sharp blade is now covered in blood and fat, and there are several cracks. If not sharpened in time, even the fur of the wild boar king may not be able to be cut open. After resting for about 10 minutes, Gordon felt that his condition had basically recovered and continued to hunt, launching a pursuit. While he was recovering his strength, the wild boar king was also too afraid to let that guy rest for too long. The dye ball that had just been used recently had a noticeable odor, and Gordon didn't spend much effort capturing the whereabouts of the wild boar king. Opposite Fong was standing by a stream, drinking water with his head down. His wounds looked quite miserable, attracting countless flies and insects from the forest, buzzing. The creek was filled with pebbles and fallen leaves, and there was no shelter. It was impossible for Gordon to approach quietly, so he gave up his plan to ambush. Grasping a pebble casually, throwing it from a distance and accurately hitting the big wild boar king's forehead. The wild boar king shook his body and angrily turned his head, his small eyes fixed on the despicable human. Gordon raised his hands and made a provocative gesture that even ants could understand, laughing and saying, "Come on. Let's continue." Roar, roar, roar. From the scorching sun in the sky to the setting sun setting in the west. The whole afternoon was spent in Gordon's constant struggle and pursuit with the wild boar king. The state of the wild boar king is getting worse and worse. The effects of numbing mushrooms and poisonous mushrooms have long been over, but their condition has not improved as a result. In these 5 or 6 hours, they have shed too much blood and have no time to recover their strength, let alone eat. The mind has always been in a highly tense state, and whenever it wants to catch its breath, that vicious human will appear wielding a knife. The injury to his left hind leg is severe. In order to reduce the burden on his left leg, the great wild boar king tried to keep his left hind leg suspended and walked on the ground with the other 3 legs. This slow walking speed is not only a further consumption of physical strength, but the great wild boar king has no other choice. If the left leg is not allowed to rest, it may not even be able to perform its most commonly used charge in combat. As a hunter, Gordon's condition is not much better either. The recovery medicine in the water bag has long been exhausted, and there are also several new injuries on the body. In order to withstand a shock, the right arm holding the shield fractured again, causing a heart-wrenching pain with every movement. And what worries him the most is the hunter's knife in his hand. The number of fractures is increasing, and the grinding stone cannot restore its original sharpness. Even a crack has appeared on the originally smooth blade surface. Perhaps the next time the blade is swung, it will completely fracture. The inexperienced young hunter did not know that the culprit behind the excessive wear and tear of weapons was actually himself. Why hasn't the instructor mentioned the easy task of using poisonous mushrooms to poison weapons? It is because the corrosive juice of poisonous mushrooms can cause irreversible damage to weapons. The special weapons that come with high toxicity are not simply coated with poison on the blade, but use targeted materials and structural design. Indeed, the highly toxic juice on the blade has to some extent suppressed the self-healing ability of the wild boar king, causing him to bleed incessantly. However, the loss is the profit, and who can say for sure before the final result comes out? Now, Gordon has once again stood in front of the wild boar king. Both are approaching their limits, and this may be the last confrontation. Come on, let's continue. The hunter waved at the wild pig king countless times. Roar, roar. The wild boar king, who had already been pushed to the brink of despair, his eyes turned red once again. The arrogance of the fierce general made it unwilling to put its last strength on running, and miraculously, its left hind leg, which had almost completely broken its Achilles tendon, stepped steadily on the ground. Long white steam spewed out from its nostrils, as if the steam engine's vent valve had been opened. The momentum of the pig's sudden advance far exceeded any previous one, and even a flying dragon blocking in front of it at this time will be severely damaged by this blow. Gordon, who felt the other party's determination, would definitely not be like the heroic story depicted in the painting. Both sides charging at the same time, passing in a staggered manner, the winner retracting his sword and sheathing it, and the loser falling. No matter how brave you are, you shouldn't play against the wild boar king. Avoidance is the only option. With his eyes fixed on the rushing wild boar king, Gordon rolled and dodged in the last moment, as he had done before, beautifully avoiding the charge. However, this time, the wild boar king's movements changed. It surprisingly did not stop, but instead forcefully changed direction in the full charge. Its small mountain-like body drew a nearly 90-degree bend on the open space in the forest, with huge fangs pointing straight at the hunter. How could it be? Gordon's face suddenly changed. How could he not have imagined that the wild boar king had even hidden his hand in the continuous pig cart? At the critical moment of life and death, he didn't even care about rolling and getting lost. He threw himself to the side with all his might and fell heavily to the ground. Even so, the distance he saved was not far enough, and the wild boar king's heavy hooves were about to crush his knee. At this moment, Gordon can only choose to hand everything over to luck. He didn't care about estimating the distance, gritted his teeth and rolled in a circle, and it was this gambling-like roll that miraculously prevented him from being trampled by the wild boar king. Without leaving any room for effort, the wild boar king charged at full speed and collided with the trunk of a large tree ahead, emitting an explosive roar. Crack! A sound distinctly different from a broken tree echoed into Gordon's ear. Gordon, who stood up in embarrassment, looked up in shock. The wild boar king's fangs are broken. Chapter 9. End of hunting, Kokot Village. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, surprise returns to astonishment. Facing the dizzy king of the wild boar, Gordon wouldn't miss such a good opportunity. Previously, due to the presence of huge fangs, it was difficult for him to attack the vulnerable neck of the wild boar king. Now, the wild boar king with a broken giant tooth on one side has not only lost a sharp spear for attack, but also a strong shield to protect the vital points. Gordon can't care about any more maneuvering, the decisive blow is now. Drink it! He shouted and jumped up high, using the force of charge and jump to thrust the hunter's knife into the vital artery on the side of the neck of the wild boar king with all his might. The tip of the hunter's knife smoothly broke through the not thick fur and thin muscles, but as it continued to penetrate, it was about to pierce the artery and insert into the trachea. The crack where the knife was located couldn't withstand the powerful force, and in Gordon's almost desperate eyes, it shattered completely like the fawn of the wild boar king. The intense pain and the thrill of being attacked made the wild boar king wake up from his dizziness. He struggled to get up, and two equally heavy breaths echoed through the forest. The wild boar king is already at the end of the crossbow, but what can a hunter lose their weapon? Use your fist to smash. Bite with teeth. That's not realistic. Even if severely injured and weakened to the extreme, human fists and feet can never break through the defense of the wild boar king's fur muscles, causing effective damage. Has everyone come here, but can only retreat? Has the hunting failed? Gordon's mind was tangled in a tangled mess, and he never expected such an outcome. Never, he roared angrily. Humans do not have sharp teeth and claws, but they forge monster claws into weapons and turn them into their own power. The voice of the instructor seemed to echo in his ear, and the young hunter's gaze fell on the nearby giant tooth. Monster's weapon, human power. Gordon's eyes flashed with a hint of madness as he roared and picked up the giant tooth, which was over 2 meters long and weighing nearly 100 kilograms, with both hands, and lifted it high. The former glory of the wild boar king now turned into a giant sword in the hands of a young hunter, carrying a howl that pierced through the air. It struck the huge head of the wild boar king heavily, knocking him to the ground. Time and time again. Amidst the dull collision of his body and hard objects, the struggle of the wild boar king became increasingly weak. Gordon gritted his teeth and squeezed every bit of strength from his muscles and bones, continuously waving his huge teeth. He knew very well that this was his last strength. Once the heavy giant teeth are lowered, they can no longer be lifted. This crazy attack lasted for almost a minute. Until the wild boar king completely lost his vitality, Gordon sat weakly on the ground, panting heavily as if his spine had been removed. He was in a state of embarrassment, but the smile on his face was unprecedentedly bright. Holding his heavy giant teeth in his hand, he grinned and shouted. "Big Wild Pig King, successful hunting." Gordon lay with his hands resting on his back on the herbivorous dragon truck returning to Kokot village, closing his eyes and reminiscing about everything that had happened in the past 2 days. The huge fangs were placed next to Gordon as spoils of war, compared to the 4 ordinary wild boar fangs, which were too inconspicuous. The truck owner in his 40s occasionally glanced back at the huge tooth, and his gaze towards Gordon was filled with admiration. This uncle and Gordon are old acquaintances, and the latter often hitchhikes with him, traveling back and forth between Shuritzen Hill and the village of Kokot. The car owner knows that Gordon is only 16 or 17 years old, and also knows that Gordon is a novice hunter who only started training 2 years ago. Underage novice hunters, relying on the most basic training equipment, have successfully hunted the wild pig king. This is news that would cause a small sensation even in the city of Minigold. How can a character like this ride a ride? It's clear that I just rubbed against someone else's guards all the way, okay. More than a day passed by in the blink of an eye on the road. When Gordon returned to the village with the tusks of the wild boar king, he instantly detonated this remote and peaceful small mountain village. Everyone exclaimed, "Since that hero, the future famous hunters will be born from our village." Compared to the villagers' bewilderment, Ernest's reaction, known as the instructor by Gordon, can only be described as horror. "Did you really use a hunter's knife to hunt the wild pig king?" The instructor's face was full of disbelief, but with that 2-meter-long giant tooth as proof, he couldn't help but believe it. For him, who has successfully hunted dragon species, the great wild boar king is not a worthy opponent to mention. Even with Gordon's equipment and weapons, he can easily achieve it with just experience and martial arts skills. But all of this is astonishing when it comes to an apprentice hunter who has not yet obtained the official hunter qualification. Well, I almost forgot that this child has just passed the assessment and can already be considered a 1-star official hunter. The body size of the wild boar king can be roughly judged from its 2-meter-long giant tooth, and its length should be around 350 to 400 centimeters, which is also above average among the wild boar king. Let this little guy accumulate a few more years, maybe he can really go to Gaefalong before the age of 20. The village chief of the dragon clan has a more subtle reaction to this village matter. The old man just smiled and squinted his eyes, kept nodding, and kept muttering, big wild boar is good, very good, very good. Gordon has reason to suspect that the old man is senile dementia. Under the questioning of the instructor, Gordon reported his hunting experience in detail. The instructor felt heartfelt gratified by Gordon's mature hunting philosophy, which was once a purely martial arts school. This hunting philosophy, at its best, means utilizing all the power available around us, while at its worst, it means resorting to all means. However, often only such hunters can survive to the end. Subsequently, the instructor summoned a physician to conduct a comprehensive examination of Gordon's body. Zhaozhuyuan.com. The latter has quite a few injuries, with the right arm being the most severe. There is some congestion in the chest cavity, some displacement of the scapula, contusions, abrasions, bruises, and countless more. Restoring medicine can quickly cure the vast majority of injuries without fail. Fractured bones and misaligned bones will not be reduced under the effect of restoring medicine, and only experienced physicians can help adjust them. After resetting Gordon's bones, dressing the wound, and draining the congestion, the doctor instructed him to lie in bed and rest for 10 to half a month to avoid any sequelae. In addition, foods rich in calcium and collagen, such as bone soup and cartilage, are very beneficial for his recovery. Without hesitation, the instructor asked the neighbor's aunt to take care of him for 2 days before heading directly to the nearest hunting ground. 2 days later, the instructor returned, along with a whole cart of herbivorous dragon meat. During his rest period, he strictly prohibited Gordon from engaging in physical training, which made Gordon feel very uncomfortable. However, on the other hand, the latter, whose parents died early, actually enjoyed the feeling of being cared for. Another week has passed. Gordon, who felt that he had fully recovered, no longer wanted to lie in bed all day. The instructor, who had no other choice but to make use of this time, had no choice but to use it. Give Gordon a tutoring session. Gordon used to dislike using a variety of hunting props, and he trusted the hunting knife in his hand more. Naturally, he didn't take it seriously when learning. This time, the instructor gave him all the necessary tools. The commonly used sonic boomerangs, flash boomerangs, and even the extremely rare thunderbolt needle have been forced to learn. This hunting prop that can summon lightning strikes in thunderstorms is not known which ghost invented it. It is both expensive and unstable, and it is easy to even be attacked by monsters and themselves. I reckon it will be eliminated by the market soon, right?